Hello, everybody, and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Waste Management Phoenix Open Initial Research Show. Hopefully, you had a successful weekend. My DFS was pretty good, although I didn't hit shit on any of my outright wagers. But even though a DFS successful weekend made some money, I'm still pissed off because I really debated about betting Tom Hoagie to win and didn't pull the trigger. So, what other profession or what other life do you know that somebody can win money during the week and still be pissed off? That would be the life of a degenerate gambler, or me, either one. We are in Scottsdale, Arizona. The famous Stadium Par 3 is part of this course, so it should be a lot of fun. It's a big name field this year as well. So, without spending too much time more in the intro, all statistics tonight are provided by FantasyNational.com. Amazing resource. Go check it out. It allows me to pretend to be good at this. It's going to make you a lot better DFS player. Going to make you much smarter gambler. So go check it out. It's well worth the investment. Links to my social media as well as an email to reach out to me are in the description of this video. The social media is where I post my betting cards, Twitter, Instagram, mainly Twitter, but betting cards and as well as interesting research I find throughout the week leading up to the tournament and during the tournament. And then finally, the chat is open. It's live. I want to hear how you did this past weekend. I heard from a couple of you in the comments how after 36 holes and periodic updates how you all were doing. 36 holes, it wasn't looking too good for me, and then Saturday was very good forming, and then today was a mixed bag. So jump in chat. Let me know how this week went. If you're not watching live, jump in the comments. Let me know how it went either this past weekend or anyone that you're thinking about early on for Phoenix this upcoming week. So with all that out of the way, let's do our initial research for the 2022 Waste Management Phoenix Open. And as we always do, we will transition over here to the tournament fact sheet for the upcoming tournament. Now, unfortunately, the 2022 tournament is not out, or at least it wasn't out as of about a half an hour ago. But this course is generally the same. Like I mentioned, we are in Scottsdale, Arizona. It is a par 71 setup, just over 7,200 yards at about 7260 roughly, give or take. Very, very fast greens, as usual here in Scottsdale. The greens are much larger. I mean, they're double the size of Pebble Beach where we just left, but they're larger than the average tour green, about 1,000 more square feet. A little bit of, the fairways here are much wider. At least they seem a lot wider because there's not as much rough. There's just more native area. There are only 3 water hazards on the course, but they come into play on 6 holes. Probably a lot of people don't think about 17, but 17 is generally a turning point as it's a drivable par 4 right after the Stadium hole par 3, where there's a little pond on the left and big risk reward kind of hole. And then there's a river creek that meanders along a few of the holes as well. So a little bit of water in play, so that makes it a lot more fun, at least for the viewer. A little bit more challenging. The greens are generally Bermuda, this Tiff Eagle Bermuda. It's overseeded with bent, POA, and perennial ryegrass, and this is why I always say I'm not an agronomist. I don't understand all of that. But according to Fantasy National, it's always been Bermuda. So we're going to look at Bermuda metrics. The fairways and rough are Bermuda as well, overseeded with this ryegrass and fescue. The TPC Scottsdale was designed by Tom Weiskopf and Jay Morish in 1986 and renovated in 2014 by Tom Weiskopf. So that is TBC Scottsdale, the Waste Management Phoenix Open course in a quick look. Larger greens. It's not the longest course, but it's definitely not short either. We're not at Sony. We're not at Pebble Beach. We're not going to be looking at long courses either, so we're going to have to find some other differentiating factors for this course. We're not going to be looking at strokes gained, long courses, or difficult or short. This plays to generally about average and is average length. So large greens, not POA. Let's see, I'm still in the past 2 weeks of mindset. Bermuda greens, generally pretty fast, if not lightning. So yeah, there is the tournament fact sheet for the Phoenix Open. And before I head on over to Fantasy National, hey, what's up, Richard? Yeah, I just pulled up chat. I tried to get through the intro and the tournament fact sheet. Justin Rose, yeah. I made a little bit as well. Fortunately, I had Rose on a couple of lineups that were, I cashed, but they weren't the ones that were making a whole lot of my money. So I got pretty fortunate, even though I was so high on Aaron Rye and Tringali and all that. Let's move on over here to Fantasy National. I'm going to go ahead and exit that out. As I mentioned, this is a pretty big field this week. You've got a lot of the big names: John Rahm, Patrick Cantlay, Justin Thomas, Seamus Power, Berger if the back doesn't hold up or doesn't give out. If it does hold up, new winner Tom Hoagie, Hideki, Victor. So it's a huge field this week. Before we continue on, Richard, did you you said you made a little bit of money. Did you enter just kind of one lineup, or did you kind of single out on Justin Rose? So, because like I said, I had him a little bit. He did okay. I got lucky in the sense that Jason Day tanked today. That's what helped me out quite a bit. But as we look at the Phoenix Open field in just a broad view, last 36 rounds, the last 6 months, your top strokes gained total players are John Rahm, Taylor Gooch, Patrick Cantlay, Sam Burns, Justin Thomas, Seamus Power, Aaron Wise, Luke List, Russell Henley, and Webb Simpson are your top 10. Harold Varner III, the newly minted Saudi, I think it's the Saudi International, but he just won the tournament over in Saudi Arabia, lurks just outside the top 10 at 11th. We'll come back to a lot of these metrics as well, but first let's take a look at the course breakdown according to Fantasy National. And like I mentioned, this is about an average length course, usually about average difficulty. You do have quite a few eagle chances though. The two of the three par fives, excuse me. Well, I guess all three of the par fives really are good eagle chances, and then as I mentioned, the drivable par 4 yields its fair share of eagles if guys manage to drive the green on the correct tier of where the hole is and all that stuff. So quite a few eagle chances. That leads me to think that we might focus on eagles, but we'll take a look at that later on tonight in the Excel portion of the show. You certainly have your holes that have come up and bite you. You got a long par 4 here. I believe this one has water down the left. You've got another long par 4 here. You've got some shorter par 4s that play generally fairly easy. Long par 3 on the front. So a good mix of lengths of par 3s, par 4s, par 5s, and such. As we come down to strokes gained by shot type, you notice that putting outweighs the approach shots, at least for the top 10 finishers, and then off the tee is actually fairly close to the approach. Like I said, this course is pretty wide open. Instead of having tree-lined fairways and stuff, it's just a lot of native area that try to prevent players from getting wayward off the tee. So generally, this is a pretty balmy course, but you do have your situations where you have to play strategically. Like I said, the 17th, if you are trying to protect going in the water and whatnot. Not to ignore the around the green, it can play a factor as well. So it's a fairly balanced tournament. We're definitely going to be looking at putting since it is the most important, at least for the top 10 players. Anyone that follows me knows that I prefer strokes gained approach, but let's take a look here. Top 10s, we go to top 5s, and approach and putting start to even out a little bit. Putting is still slightly favored off the tee and around the green, hovering around right about the same in terms of importance and percentage in relation to the others. And then you look at winners, again, more of kind of the same. You got 1.07 here in the approach, 1.07 here in the putting. Off the tee becomes a little bit more importantly skewed, and around the green kind of falls off. But generally, it's pretty balanced. So it's a very fun analytical tournament to try to decipher where your value and where your hidden players are that you're trying to focus on. You see here, ball striking and short game, they're generally pretty close. That's just because of the around the green not necessarily being the it is the least important, but not a factor, if that makes sense. My English is fantastic, as you can tell. But ball striking generally most important on any course, but short game here is important. It is pretty darn important. Strokes gained by hole type, 3s, 4s, and 5s, you can tell. Par 5s heavily skewed. That's just due to the 3 easy par 5s that are eagle chances, and then the 4s and the 3s. Now this is for the top 10, so let's see if the top 5 and the winners make a difference. You can see here even more skew for the par 5s, and then the winners. Yeah. So again, just like Pebble Beach, we're going to be focusing a lot on the strokes gained par 5s. We'll find out here in a little bit if there are lengths of par 5s or maybe par 4s that we want to focus on. And speaking to that, this whole composition, so the 4 par 3s are pretty evenly spread out. You've got 1 short, 2 medium length, and 1 very long par 3. We have the aforementioned 17th hole, which is a drivable par 4, 300 and I believe it's 35 on the scorecard, but they move that around and such. You've got 5 par 4s in between 400 and 450, and 450 and 500. And these were the 2 key ranges, as well as Pebble, at Pebble Beach. But theirs, I believe, was the 350 to 400. So we just add 50 more yards on each of the 2 categories, where we're going to look at 400 to 450 and 450 to 500. And when we go through the leaderboard, we'll see if there is more of a correlation between the 2 par 4s and which one is most important. We move over here to the approach shot distribution. We noticed that especially at the Farmers, we focused on the 200 plus. And then at Pebble Beach, we put, or at least I put 5% in the 100 to 125. Fantasy National will update the entire tournament statistics tomorrow, so we'll see if this actually did play a factor for Pebble Beach. I didn't check throughout the weekend. I was actually out of town Saturday and watched just a little bit today. So if indeed there is an important range or approach shot range, it could very well be this 150 to 175 with about 4% more approaches coming from that range than the average tour event. So we'll see if this is a factor or not. Historic cut line here at the WMPO, Waste Management Phoenix Open, generally plays to about even. It was even for 4 straight years. Last year it dipped into the -2, played a bit easier A couple years before the consistent pattern of even, it's been 1, 2, so it hovers right about even, and I believe that's a little bit actually on the difficult end of average. I believe the average tour cut is in between 0 and -1, I believe. You see scoring distribution around a par, a lot more birdies than bogeys. You actually are able to see a bit of the graph on the Eagles, and the doubles aren't as high as some normal courses. So it generally it's kind of weird that the cut line is on the more difficult side of average, but yet the course plays a bit on the easier side of average. It's just the way kind of things go. You see here driving accuracy a little bit less than the tour average, and you'll see that when we get to the driving distance, it'll make sense why. Green regulation percentage speaks to the just sheer size of the greens, a little bit higher than the tour average, but not too much. Scrambling higher here. 3 putts per round are almost at the average tour event, just slightly less. A lot of that is because of the speed of these Bermuda greens. And then we were speaking about the lesser driving accuracy. It's because guys are hitting it far here. They're trying to get as close as they can to the hole. Like I said, with only a few water hazards in play, or a few holes with water hazards in play, and not a lot of sand bunkers, the only thing deterring players from getting wayward off the tee is native area. And a lot of times that can be played out of, I don't want to say easily, but for tour pros, it's not as bad to play out of. So guys are just hitting it far. Proximity, again, just because of the sheer size of greens, is a little further away than the average tour event. And then there's the length of the average birdie putts and such. So there's a look at the course from a graphical view. At least according to Fantasy National, we'll see if we can find some metrics that jump out as more correlating or not. But let's take a look at some historic conditions here at Scottsdale, or TPC Scottsdale. You see here scoring relative to par. Last year it played pretty easy. A lot of times it's average to easy. You'll have some difficult rounds sometimes, especially if it gets real firm, real fast and such. But generally it's about average. You can see here green speed has always been fast. I don't think it has been lightning. No, I don't see any lightning down back to 2015. So always fast. We're definitely going to be using fast Bermuda metrics for putting. The greens are generally firm, for what that's worth. Bermuda greens, like we talked about. The length, 72 to 74. I mean, that's one metric in Fantasy National, but I really try to narrow it down, as sometimes the 72 to 74 can be a bit misleading. If a course is at 7,211, we're definitely going to want to focus more on the short courses than otherwise. So there's a look at the historic conditions of the Waste Management Phoenix Open. Let's take a look at of the guys in the field who has played this event well in the past, or at least by a strokes gained total view. And of the past 5 years, it's actually Matt Kuchar and Jon Rahm with the same exact strokes gained total, with Kuchar having 3 top 10s and another top 20, Jon Rahm being much more consistent but only 2 top 10s, as opposed to the 2 top 5s for Kuchar, but both of them play this event very well. You've got Ricky, your 2019 winner here. He did miss the cut last year, but has generally played this event fairly well. Justin Thomas missed the cut way back in 2017, has gotten better, including a solo third the year Ricky won. Your defending champion is Brooks Koepka. Did not play this event for 3 years, and then came back and won. This was kind of the notice to the golf world that Brooks healthy back, as much as Brooks can be healthy with all the knee speculation, all that stuff. You see, Webb Simpson here, who won in 2020. Gary Woodland is one here. Hideki is one here. So there is no one way to play this course. You got Webb, who by no means is a bomber off the tee. He is more precision based. I would say, Ricky can move it, but he is much more known for putting and whatnot, especially in his heyday. Hideki, long, good irons. Woodland, long. So there's no one player generally that we're going to focus on here. It is a pretty good test of your complete game. But there's a look at the guys who have played this fairly well, or extremely well, I should say. Xander, Bubba Watson's played well here. Louis, the 2 times he has played here, has been very successful with one top 15 and a solo third. So let's move to the other end of the spectrum here. You got Siwoo Kim, who is actually the least strokes gained total in the field so far, this week, depending on withdrawals and so on. He has made the cut twice to some clunkers and then missed the cut 3 more times. Tyler Duncan, CT Pan. He's 3 for 5 making the cut, but pretty terrible finishes. Ryan Moore, coming off a pretty good tournament at Pebble Beach. Kevin Chappell, Stanley, Sebastian Munoz. Hey P, how you doing? You'll be at the tournament. Awesome. That is awesome. You'll have to say, come stop by next week, and definitely in the comments. This is one of the bucket list courses, that's for sure. Wow, I'm pretty jealous. Do you have seats for the stadium hole, or the 16th, or are you just gonna kind of venture around and watch your favorite guys? Gotta say, I'm pretty jealous. So we've got P here. He's in Arizona going to that tournament. We'll get to that, Richard. We'll get to that here in a little bit. I'm going to go through a bit of the leaderboard here before we go to the main metrics. But I'll definitely get into the putting for sure. But to finish the point, like P apparently is in Arizona or close to it, to where he can go to the tournament. Another viewer is in Connecticut, close to the Travelers. So that's pretty sweet. I love building the community that are close to the courses. Oh, okay. Been going since the early 2000s. Oh man, you don't need Stadium Hole Madness. I think if there was if there were any kind of Ryder Cup feel on the PGA Tour year over year, I would imagine it's the 16th at TPC Scottsdale. But that's pretty sweet. How is the tournament? Obviously, it's probably not too hot during this time of year, but I'm jealous. You'll have to come in next week and stop in the comments and let us know how it goes. But here's a look at the guys that don't play it well. I mentioned Siwoo, Ryan Moore, CT Pan, Aaron Wise, Taylor Gooch hasn't played this event very well in the past. Seamus Power, 0 for 1. Take that a little bit with a grain of salt. So there's a look at the guys that traditionally have not played this course very well. Let's look at a quick leaderboard here from last year, and again we'll look back more years tomorrow in the Data Dive show, but we'll just kind of get a gauge here of what kind of played last year at least. And you can see here that it looked like off the tee wasn't too terribly important, at least in relation to the other 3 kind of umbrella stats. You've got your strokes gained approach, no surprise. We saw with the graph that putting seemed to be most important. And again, I'm just going by kind of a feel on the numbers here. You've got a 7.5, a 6.5. You really only have one, kind of small positive here by KH Lee, whereas some of these numbers aren't as high in the approach. So let's take a look here off the tee. Yeah, it's not as strong of a correlation as you might think. You've got your runner-up here, a top 10, a top 20. But you do have a miscut and some middling to clunker finishes. You got, oh man, that's another bucket list. Tickets for the RBC Heritage. Wow. Man, guys, you need to hook a friend up. Oh, I'm jealous. Obviously, the Masters would probably be one, but I want to get out to Scottsdale. Harbor Town, I imagine, would be beautiful. Walking that course, the Pete Dye design, the lighthouse in the back. Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm jealous now. I kind of just want to go and get some tickets. So there's a look at off the tee. We'll look at strokes gain approach. A little bit more a lot more correlating than the off the tee. You don't have the high finishes that you would expect, but you definitely have your made cuts. You have to come down here to Doc Redmond before you get a miscut. So what's this? Maybe 16 to 18, with a few hours of Chicago. Yeah, okay. I love Chicago. Pretty cold right now. I guess up in that way, what would be the 3M? Is that the one in Minnesota? Corn Ferry was 10 minutes away last year. Nice. The closest event to me is the Barbasol in Kentucky. That's the closest one where I reside. But strokes gain approach, you got your cut makers here. Some middling finishes, some decently high, top 20, top 5, some more top 20s here. So approach seems to be somewhat important. Yeah, cold. Yeah, I can imagine. You're snowbirding it up at least for a little bit while you can. I get it. Strokes gain around the green. We saw how this was going to be supposedly close to off the tee, and I don't see much here. It's kind of all or nothing. You got your runner-up finisher, a top 10, but you have some a clunker, miscut, along with a top 15 and such. So around the green seems, at least in 2021, hit and miss. Aaron Hills and Whistling less than 3 hours. Whistling, up in Wisconsin. Yeah, I forgot about that. That'd have been sweet. Don't hang out. It's all great. It's all good, man. This is what I do. I want to interact with the viewers and hear about stories and stuff. That's what we're here for. And then finally, strokes gain putting. It was supposedly the most important graphically. I'm kind of seeing it here. You got a couple of top 25s, 2 top 5s. You really only have one clunker of a made cut here from Davis Riley last year, but you have a pretty good run of high success underneath him. And then you don't have a miscut until Rory Sabatini down here in maybe 25 to 30. So yeah, clearly the putting, at least last year, was the most important. So there's a look at least on the overhead, or what I call the umbrella stats, the tee, approach, around the green, and putting. So we'll come back to this a couple of times here tonight. But to your question, Richard, let's the first thing I always do in the initial research show, after we go through the breakdown, the historic conditions and such, the first thing I always do, because we know the green type, we generally know the speed and such, we will look at that. So we know that it is Bermuda here at TPC Scottsdale, and I am going to go ahead and set the filter for fast, knowing that when we looked at the historic conditions, all of it was fast. I don't see any time it has been average or lightning, so I'm just going to go ahead and set the fast filter. So looking at fast and Bermuda, and I have it right now for the last 36 rounds. Let's do last 6 months just to see how many rounds that is. Might have to widen it a little bit. Yeah, so there's only 10 rounds here. We'll have to bring it out to the last 12 months. Let's see how many rounds that is. 26? Let's see what these two are. Okay, so it goes back to the WPM MPO. I'm actually going to narrow it down to the last 24 and see how guys perform on Bermuda other than the Waste Management Phoenix Open. Yep. So your best 10 strokes gained putting players on fast Bermuda greens within the last calendar year, minus a day or two, are Chesson Hadley, Zach Johnson, Sam Burns, Harry Higgs, and Matthew Fitzpatrick is fifth, followed by Louis Oosthuizen, Brian Gay, Denny McCarthy, Kevin Tway, and Harris English are your top 10 strokes gained putting on fast Bermuda greens. So I'm going to go ahead and because you asked, it looks like clearly Bermuda is Fitzpatrick's best surface. And the reason I wanted to check on this graph here is perhaps he performed well on fast, but overall on Bermuda, say if it was average or whatnot, he wasn't very good. But clearly, Matthew Fitzpatrick, or Matt Fitzpatrick as he prefers now, heavily prefers Bermuda. So that is definitely something to look at, considering putting is going to be very important this week as well. Coming off a successful Pebble Beach. Last I saw, I think he was top 10. He had a decent run on Sunday here. I think he shot a 68 or so, -3, -4. So definitely somebody to take a look at. And actually, Fantasy National has the Pebble Beach already in. I didn't think they would have it until tomorrow. Now, we don't want to take too much on the putting because POA is so different than Bermuda, than Bent, and whatnot. But clearly the putter is in form, at least recently. The U.S. Open, that was on POA? No, that was the PGA. Where was the U.S. Open? I can't even remember now. Oh, Torrey Pines. So POA again. Yeah, so... did I close out of Fitzpatrick? I apologize. So, yeah, we don't want to take too much from this. St. Jude, I believe, is on Bent. TPC Southwind, I believe, is Bent. Northern Trust. Where was this? This was... Now I'm going to have to check. Oh, Liberty National. Yeah. And I believe it is Bent. Yep. So, of the rounds recently, or at least the measured rounds here in the States that Fitzpatrick has been bad at, have been Bent and POA. So, the Palmetto, I imagine, were Bermuda. This is South Carolina. The Heritage, Bermuda, fantastic. So, it's starting to line up here behind the graph as well, showing that Fitzpatrick is... if you're wanting to focus on putting this week, Fitzpatrick's probably going to be a focal point either around your wagers or early leans for DFS. Let's see. We don't have difficult, we don't have easy, we don't have long or short to look at. So, let's see if we can dig into a couple of these other stats. I'm going to come into the last 6 months again, 36 rounds. We saw how important the par fives were. So let's just kind of take a look and go to the par five efficiencies and see kind of who just kind of jumps up here. Probably your bigger names as you would expect, but your top 10 strokes gained par five players in the past 6 months. You got Patrick Cantlay, Seamus Power, John Rahm, McNeely, Taylor Gooch, Aaron Wise, Fitzpatrick, Scotty Scheffler, Tom Hoge, and Hideki. So those are your top 10 strokes gained par 5 players in the past 6 months. We saw, at least graphically, how important the par 5s are here. Actually, let's take a look into that last year. You can see just 2 players were negative in the top, so it comes down to the top 30 here. So really, we'll come down to the top 30. Only 4 players were negative in the par 5s last year. And when you take a look at the leaderboard, I mean, look at this run of high finishes here. Top 10, top 5. Joey, what's going on, man? Hope you had had a good weekend. Yeah, it's been it was a pretty fun weekend for me. Decent DFS. Of course, being a degenerate gambler, I wanted to bet Tom Hoagie, didn't pull the trigger. Now I'm pissed off, even though I won money. Should have won more money. But yeah, you can see here just the strokes gained par 5, how important it is. Like, you've got a middling finish here from Brian Harmon, and you got to come all the way down here for more middling to clunker finishes. Yeah, it's par 5s are going to be pretty darn important this week. Let's check and see. I want to come back here to the course breakdown. I don't think I've focused a lot on the par 5. So all 3 par 5s, at least on the scorecard, measure 550 to 600. Well, I'm glad I helped you win some money, Joey. I really am. Anytime I can help give you some good advice, I'm happy. Sometimes I need to listen to my own advice, and sometimes you don't need to listen to my advice. And well, for example, Aaron Rye. I hope you all weren't too heavy on Aaron Rye. So we'll come back here. So again, I wanted to come back and see the length of the par 5. So all of them supposedly fall in this range here, but clearly some will play shorter when they move tees around and all that stuff. So let's definitely take a look here first, since all 3 on the scorecard measure here. And it's pretty darn similar to the regular par 5s. Let's see, top 20, 10, 5, middling to clunker, depending on what you want out of that. Yeah, so a decent run here. Looks fairly important. Let's see the 500, 550s when they move it around. Again, some pretty strong correlation here. You do have this person, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that and butcher it, who missed the cut. But you have some pretty sustained success up here as well. Honestly, I would argue it's more correlating than the 550 to 600, but I imagine that you have more data, actual raw data, in this column here. So clearly it's strokes gained par 5 are going to be very, very important this week. Let's go to par 4s. We saw how it was 400 to 450 or 450 to 500. So this is a look at the leaderboard without sorting. Again, I'm advocating almost every week that strokes gained par 4 are just the most important metric in golf. And you see that here. Let's see the lengths. Let's see how strong a correlation is here. And honestly, at the top of the leaderboard, there's not much here at 400 to 450. You've got 2 missed cuts, a clunker, a couple of middlings to clunker. Now you do have some success down here, but I wouldn't say this is a strong correlation, at least up at the top. 450 to 500, a little stronger. You definitely have some bad results here, but at least you have some cut makers. Clunker here, but your top 30s, 20s. I'm not sure. We'll have to check tomorrow on the data dive if maybe this is an outlier year, or perhaps neither of the lengths are all that important. It's just the par 4s. So let's see. Is there anything else I really want to focus on before we move to XL? Maybe driving distance. We can take a look at that. So last year, we see that driving distance, I mean, he had some higher numbers here, Xander, Brooks, but it looked like it didn't really matter too terribly much, or at least in terms of leaderboard success. You sort by driving distance. Yeah, I mean, it's your top 6 here or so. Got a couple of middlings, decent high finishes, but Cameron Champ missed the cut. Well, he's going to be up on the driving distance board anyway, but Scott Harrington was high, Gary Woodland was high, Fratelli. Doesn't look like there's a lot of success, at least from last year, on driving distance. And we saw that in the graphical breakdown here, how guys really don't pay attention much to the accuracy. They're just trying to hit it far. So maybe that's the wrong way to play the course. But then again, these are tour pros, and I'm just sitting here on my ass looking at graphs. So what do I know? I think that's going to do it for the Fantasy National portion. So let me switch over to Microsoft Excel here. Let me bring up this and then switch view. So this is, again, the kind of spreadsheet that I've put together. Let me bring up chat again. That kind of shows the strength of different metrics that correlate to high success, and the lower the number here, the more correlating success. So we see that last year approach and putting were just about the same, but year over year approach is supposedly, at least the past 5 years, approach has been slightly more important than putting, but this is really, really close. A lot of times approach will be quite a bit more important than putting. But off the tee, looks like it's pretty darn important. This is one of the lower numbers that I've seen in a while at 42. Distance, again, look here, it's 51. It's supposedly, at least graphically, a course that guys just hit it long. Other than this in 2019, it doesn't look like there's a lot of correlation here. It looks like, again, probably no surprise, but greens. And we saw how important it was this past week at Pebble Beach. If you weren't on the green and giving yourself at least a birdie chance, you weren't coming close. I still feel fairly good about my analysis that it wasn't going to be a birdie fest. Now I know the score was 19 under, but 5 was the cut. So I don't classify that as a birdie fest when it's a 3-day cut. But maybe my definition is different than yours. But we see here greens, fairly important. We've had some debate here in the past couple of weeks about birdies versus bogeys. And here it's pretty darn close. But this number here really strikes to me because 27 is very low for double bogeys. We haven't seen a number that low quite a bit. I'm going to scroll up a couple of tournaments like Pebble Beach. It was a 41. And again, remember, the lower the number, the more correlating success to upper tier finishes. So 41 at the Pebble Beach, 43 at the Farmers. Amex was a 38. So we have a 27 here at Phoenix. Looks like double bogey avoidance is very, very, very important here. And that makes some sense when you have some water off the tee, that you're not giving away shots. Supposedly the par 3s were the least important metric. Here it's a 34. It's pretty low. No real range. I'm going to throw this one out because it doesn't have 5 full years of data. If there was a range, it would be the long par 3, the 215, or at least what it says on the scorecard, 215. But that's just one hole, so I don't know how strongly I feel about that. Again, par 4 is generally the most important. 21, that's probably going to be the lowest number we see. It turns out, at least from the numbers, it looks like the 450 to 500 is clearly the most important of the range of par 4s here at the WMPO at TPC Scottsdale. So that'll be something to look at definitely tomorrow on the Data Dive show as we go back a few years. Let's just look at a couple more things here. Par 5s, 36. This is actually a higher number than the par 3s, but notice that you have a pretty big outlier here from 2020. So if I just delete that, it comes down to a 34. So that's a pretty strong correlating factor for par 5s. And then looks like both. Oh God, this is what happens when I freeze panes and then I'm an idiot and start doing stuff like this. It looks like both of the par 5s are fairly similar in importance factor. If there's one more than the other, it's the 550 to 600. We saw that, at least graphically, most of the approaches come from 150 to 175. Let's see if that plays out. Ooh, I just saw a number here. Proximity, 44. This is pretty low. Like we looked at Pebble Beach last week, proximity total, 56. So to your point, Richard, you were spot on, actually, with Ryan Armour. He ended up finishing higher than Satoshi Kodaira. I wasn't on Ryan Armour at all, but I used Kodaira in DFS some. He got me some points. had a bad Sunday, but look at this proximity total metric. Like Pebble Beach 56, it was only 56. Farmers 57. Heck, at American Express it wasn't important at all. 68. So looks like proximity could be a metric here at TPC Scottsdale. We look at with a 44 and a half, 45. Instead of 150 to 175, it looks like the most important here is 175 to 200, or at least over the past 5 years. Yeah, and I take out that outlier here, it's even lower, 47 and a half. That'll be interesting to see if that how that looks on the leaderboards tomorrow on the Data Dive show. Just a couple more things here. Let's see. Let's do the course evaluation. So I've already got this on the Phoenix here at the top. So of the other full field events of those courses, so for example, I'm not using the Tour Championship. There's only 30 players. I'm not using the BMW. There's only 70 players. Of the courses that have full field events or close to it, like the Genesis, it looks like there are a bunch of important metrics. So last week we had a bunch of negatives. This one looks like it is positives all. Hey Josh, how you doing? How was this weekend? Did you do well? Did you make that money that we talked about on Wednesday? I hope you didn't use Aaron Rye a lot. I hope you didn't use Tringali a lot. But I hope you used Tom Hoagie a lot, because that ended up working out. I was lucky. Jason Day faded today, and that made it a pretty darn good. You faded Power. I mean, the first 2 days it looked stupid, but the last 2 days it looked genius. So, hey, you were half right. I tried to get half credit. I mean, I know I missed Aaron Rye, but perhaps I get credit for having Hoagie 5th in my rankings, maybe. Partial credit. But we come back here, it's really weird that all of these are more important than the average tour event, because I'll bring you up to Pebble Beach here. We saw Pebble Beach, there was a lot of negatives. So we had to try to figure out what was the most important out of these metrics. Here we've got the opposite problem where a lot of things are positive. So maybe we have to focus on what's at least the most positive, or maybe closer to average. Well, let's see here. We saw putting. It's supposedly 9% more important than the average tour event here. 12% approach, 10% tee. Cantley, Hoagie, Hughes, Lonto, but had Glover and Ryan Armour. Glover missed the cut. Ryan Armour actually had a really good Sunday. I think last I saw he finished top 30. Yeah, exactly. Cantley, solid. Hoagie. I had Mackenzie Hughes a lot, and that helped. Absolutely. I had Mac Hughes quite a bit. Distance, important. Yeah, this is interesting. This is the first time I've had this problem. We see here double bogeys. Yeah, so so something I'm gonna have to do tomorrow is go through each of these years and find maybe some outliers and see if these numbers change much at all. Because as I said, let's just look at the 4 umbrella stats. I mean, everything was negative at Pebble Beach, and everything is supposedly more important here at Phoenix. So this will be an interesting week for the analytics, since last week I was able to decipher what was kind of important, what was not. We'll see if I can do the same this week. So there's a look at the course from a data nerd's perspective. Last thing I want to do, and this is kind of on the piggyback of the tournament history where it showed the guys' strokes gained total. This is performance here at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, TPC Scottsdale, the past 5 years, and the metrics for the guys, and how they performed in specific metrics. And of course, as always, I'm sorted by the average finish. So again, these first, 4 guys here, you got Neesmith, who he's only played it one time, finished 7th, so that's great, but I don't put a lot of weight into that because it was only one time. For example, last week somebody was asking about Charles Schwartzel and said, I don't discount it, but it's only one time, and turns out he had a shit week. So I was glad I was off of that very quickly. And that's why it's so very important to make sure you just have enough data so it can normalize. It can get out the outliers, if you will, or at least you're able to see the outliers easier. But anyway, so of the guys that have played it a decent amount of times, you got Xander here, the average finish of 11th, Rahm and Kuchar. Those were the most by strokes gained total. Those two. Hideki 4 times, never missed the cut. Tomorrow for the Data Dive show, we'll definitely be getting into a lot of the metrics. We'll be going back a few years, seeing what the leaderboards say, 2020, 2019, 2018, how much of these are consistent metrics. I will definitely make sure to try to highlight some outlier performances. I started to do that. I have it on the other monitor here. I started to do that. We'll see, maybe double bogeys here. Are double bogeys really all that important, like the bogeys and the birdies? Par 3 scoring, is it maybe a hidden little metric? We'll see. Guys, that's going to do it for the initial research tonight. Jump in the comments. I heard from a few of you. Jump in the comments. Say, how you did this week. What some of your lineups were. You all gave some of your lineups. Josh did. Let me bring up if I still have it up. That's Fantasy National. If I still have it up, I do. Here we go. So this is the lineup, and again, fully admitting that I got pretty darn lucky, because at the beginning of the DFS Tactics show, I told you that if Kevin Streelman played well and if Jason Day played well, I was going to lose. I wasn't going to cover all my bases. I got extremely lucky. Kevin Streelman just missed the cut, so I was already ahead of a lot of the field there. I thought I was in trouble with Jason Day. He ended up, tanking on Sunday, so that helped. My best team, and I put it in all the contests that I'm in, was Lonto Griffin, Bezadenhout, Hoagie, Hughes, McCarthy, and Taylor Pendrith. That was one of the lineups that was solid for me. And then another one was Rose, Griffin, Hoagie, Hughes, Putnam, and Davis Riley. And of course, I put on social media Saturday night when I got back in town that I was depending on Davis Riley for another Sunday. Last time I was banking on Davis Riley, he went +6 on a Sunday. So, do I have faith or do I accept my disappointment now? Well, fortunately, I didn't have all of the eggs, or at least all of the DFS eggs, in Davis Riley, because I would have been disappointed again. But it was a fairly solid DFS week for me, despite having Tringali a lot, despite having Aaron Rye a lot. Again, I will admit that it was pretty darn lucky that the lineups that I didn't have didn't have Tringali, didn't have Rye. I had these high finishers. Hoagie, Hughes was really good for me, 8.5%. Putnam was 6%. Had him quite a bit. So there was a good and a bad, but overall I felt pretty good about the rankings that I had this past week at Pebble Beach. So, guys, I appreciate the interaction. P, don't ever say hang up and listen. Always want the interaction. Always want the questions and the comments and the Nick, you're an idiot. That's yeah, Josh. We're trying to hit big. Like I said at the top of the show, I made a little bit of money, and I'm still pissed off that because I wanted to pull the trigger on Tom Hoagie's win odds. I didn't do it. So what other profession can you win a little bit of money and still be pissed off? Well, that's a degenerate gambler. So, guys, thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow night for the Daily Dive Show. For all of your contests that you were in this past week, for all of the wagers that you made at the Pebble Beach, and for any early wagers that you're thinking about making at the Phoenix Open. Until I see you tomorrow night, may all your bets be profitable.